What's up? My name is Omari Salisbury at ConvergeMedia. Welcoming you guys here to our Community Voices. This is a program that we started here during the protest because we want to be able to give voices literally to the community. We spend a lot of time right here in the CHOP, and I think we do an incredible amount of coverage here, but I think it's important to also reach out to different communities and community members and organizations as to, you know, their perspective as to what's going on, especially during this protest season that we find ourselves here, and their perspectives. And today I have Joaquin Garrett, I have Nikita Oliver. You know what I'm saying? This is like, I got some big bookends here. These are big names in the Emerald City, man. Welcome, Joaquin.
Peace, man. Thank you for letting us be here. You know, you're the international star now, my brother.
Oh man, you know I'm just a poor little country boy from 29th and Jackson in the Central District.
We're supporting acts right now. We're opening acts.
Oh man, you stop that. And also we have Nikita Oliver.
Peace, peace. Thank you so much for having us here today.
All right, fantastic. So thanks for joining. And man, clearly it's been a lot going on. The city during these protests now that still remain, and tomorrow they're saying that, you know, action here at the CHOP where we're actually broadcasting from, removal of barricades and everything else. But I wanted to be able to get some perspective from you guys, because there's the CHOP and the protests that are going on right now. You know what I'm saying? The catalyst kind of being in Seattle and a lot of other places around the country. You know what I'm saying, what I call the crime against humanity, which was the murder of George Floyd. And I think after the murder, some people come in on different places, but it's hard to find people across America, red or blue, that don't think that was just a crime against humanity. And, you know, different cities responded different ways. Most cities across America, there was marches, some protests, some that still remain every single day. Seattle is one that's still remaining here, and we see it right here in the CHOP. But the problems that have yet to find solutions here in the black community of Seattle actually go back almost as old as First AME right up the street. You know what I'm saying? Before Washington ever became a state, you know, you go back almost 140 years when black people occupied the Central District and actually what is now called Capitol Hill, because if First AME is just 2 blocks up, 136 years ago, if you built a church, there wasn't no Uber, there wasn't no this and that. You built a church where your population was. So that'll tell you, with First AME being 2 blocks away, you know, at one point in time that even Capitol Hill was a place that black people inhabited. But the problems in our black community go back since the beginning, the founding of our city. And I wanted to be able to give a platform right here, you know, for you guys to introduce, you know, like what is going on and things like that. 2, the mayor made some actual comments. 1 about, you know, the issues at, it was then Chaz, but now CHOP, and the legacy black community. She also talked about Fire Station 6 and what's going on there. Also her equitable development program and so forth. But before we get into that, you know, I think that it's important for people to understand what is King County Equitable now, and I'll let either one of you guys kind of get an overview. I know that some of the representatives today kind of have the breakout parts of it, but just in an overview, what is King County Equitable now? You know, what's it all about? Who are some of the partners in it, and what are you trying to achieve?
King County Equity Now is a coalition of black-led organizations, black organizers who understand the legacy of black community here in Seattle and the King County region, who have a set of demands and a value for seeing black peoples in our region finally receive and have the opportunity to build the things that we need and we desire, and to do that based on our own self-determination, our own understanding of who we are culturally, of who we want to see ourselves be and how we want to build. And it is a coalition of organizations, organizers, many of whom have been doing work in our region for a very long time. Some people whose families have lived here historically, and some who are maybe new organizers to the area but have built folks like myself, I lived here since 2004, have been able to build relationship in Black community. You know, those organizations include Community Passageways, Creative Justice, I believe the Village of Hope, which does really important work of connecting our incarcerated relatives with folks that are still living in community and making sure that the work that we do, whether it's protesting or legislatively, actually aligns with bringing our loved ones home and ensuring that our children get to stay in our community. And so the goal of that work is to build a strong power base, knowing that really our best power is in us as a people. And when we can align our relationships, align our goals, align our demands, align our movements, we're going to be much more successful at moving the power structures in the direction that serves who we are, who we know ourselves to be, and who we want to thrive into being.
Right. And now what King, I was going to hit you is that maybe you can give some context as to when we talk about, you know, I mean, it's demands, things are being demanded, so that's the word that we'll use. But some of these things that are being demanded, just to give some context to right now, you know what I'm saying, we're in this era that was kind of, like I said, sparked by George Floyd. How long back do some of these demands that King County Equity Now are demanding? What's the timeline on those?
I mean, that's a good question. You know, how long have we been here? You know, as Sister Nikita was saying, it's a coalition. It's actually a growing coalition of Black-led organizations and those that want to support Black-led organizations in achieving equity in every area that we've been denied equity, which we know is every area, whether you're talking about education, economic development, health, the criminal injustice system, you know, all of these areas, business development, land ownership, property ownership, every area, you know, looking at the reality, right? There's a term, racial realism, which informs part of this work, which is, you know, the reality, coming to the reality that things are not getting incrementally better, like, you know, it was inequitable from day one because equity is ownership, right? And we know there's been a lot of conversations about property damage and looting, but our people are the descendants of those who were looted and brought to America as property, right? And denied the benefit or terrorized out of their labor capital for, you know, 200, 300 years, and all the wealth that was derived from that was maldistributed. It was inequitably distributed to someone else. They call it white privilege for some, but really it's unearned benefit, right? I go to work and you get the check, right? And you didn't do anything, right? And so when we're talking about equity now, we're talking about really balancing and really creating a plan, an actionable plan that, you know, within our lifespans, you know, within, you know, 20 years, 18 years, we will hit some equity, right, and ownership. Because right now, the reality is that in Chief Seattle City, in Martin Luther King Jr. County, you know, the inequity can be clearly illustrated by just asking the question, how much commercial space, how much industrial space, meaning the industrial, the manufacturing, you know, the ports, you know, this is the actual economy. How much of that land do Black people own, have equity in? The answer is going to be basically none. How many buildings do Black people own downtown or even on Capitol Hill, which was, you know, a Black community settled here at one time? The answer is pretty much none. So the little bit of land that we actually had, residential land that we were reserved to, you know, in a sense of a urban reservation where we were redlined in or quarantined to, whatever, now just that little bit of land where we were able to build up some ownership over generations, the only place where we could own, they want to come and take that, right? And so we can't have that. So that's what equity, King County Equity Now is about, that, a coalition, a growing coalition of organizations focused on solutions, right? Creating the solutions to actually get to the equity that we hear the mayor, other city officials, other stakeholders and power brokers in the city speaking about so much, whether it's social justice, shared prosperity, you know, equitable development. We hear all of these things in rhetoric, but the material reality is going in a different direction. And what I'm saying is that we are currently on trajectory, if it continues, which we're not striving to have it continue, that black people will basically have no equity. They won't have any ownership in the city of Seattle.
I think, and Daryl, we're gonna skip over one, and let's get ready for clip number 2. And this clip right there, speaking of that, you know, we spoke to the mayor back on June 12th. And back when this was the Chaz, and this is a fluid situation over here. Believe me, I know, I'm on the ground. But we talked to her about what is the city of Seattle going to do about, the preservation and actual growth and sustaining of the Central District. And this is what Mayor Durkin had to say when we talked to her. Like, what actions are the city taking proactively to help preserve this legacy community there?
So we started it, but we haven't done enough. So number one is, I think that our Equitable Development Initiative, which has funded programs like Africa Town and Liberty Bank, is going to be really key to have those cornerstones. But then when we also invest in places like the Central Area Senior Center, Fire Station 6, those will be additions to bring those anchors back. I think we've got to support, as the redevelopment of a lot of those traditional black churches start to move, we got to make sure that stays in black hands. That starts with promising and delivering to community more investments. And I'm talking on the scale of, I think we need to invest at least $100 million a year for the next 10 years that goes back into community to invest in those institutions that we have underfunded for generations.
When we talked to the mayor, it doesn't seem like she disagrees, and she also talked about things like the transfer of Fire Station 6 to Liberty Bank building. She talked about $100 million a year going into black programs, I'm sure not just in the Central District, but, across the city. What's your response to that?
Well, I think, a lot of the work, like the Equitable Development Initiative Plan, is something that came out of work that preceded Mayor Durkin's administration. So Racial and Social Equity Task Force with Africa Town, Rainier Beach Action Coalition, Chinatown Preservation and Development Association, others came together across communities to create the Race and Social Equity Task Force, which brought forth the Equitable Development Initiative Plan that's part of the City of Seattle Comprehensive Plan. Unfortunately, it wasn't funded at the level to really get to equity, but what was able to happen was some projects were able to be piloted to show that, this can work, we just need the investment to scale it up. So then, yes, we did write a letter, which we called for $1 billion worth of investment, just to try to balance the scales out with all the predatory development that's happening in the Central District and the South, in the South End, to even get some semblance of balance, right? And so it's good that she heard that and responded to it, in terms of saying $100 million, a year for 10 years. But we need to accelerate that process because there has to be bold, unprecedented investments to really get any semblance of equity. Because, again, we're not even talking about the commercial space and buildings in high rises downtown or industrial space on the port so that we can have, things coming in, import, export, and participating in the real global economy that the city of Seattle is a critical piece of. So again, we're still just trying to get the knee off of our neck so that we can breathe. But that doesn't mean we have food on our plate. That doesn't mean we have a place to stay. That doesn't mean we have wealth to pass on to the next generation. We're just trying to get to let me breathe, right? And that's what we're talking about with these initial investments to get the knee off of our neck in the Central District and the South End, where our communities are basically being ethnically cleansed with using economics to, ethnically cleanse, these neighborhoods and ultimately the city, because it's not like people are moving from the CD to Laurelhurst or to Queen Anne, right? They're getting out of the city completely. So I think it's a start. I think, the King County Equity Now plan has two major components, which one is we need the land, focusing first on the land that's publicly owned, repurpose that and underutilized, repurpose that to address these issues, access to the capital to develop, support the contractors to be able to build in their communities, the businesses to be able to go into the spaces, and then the second part is control over the resources that are supposed to impact our lives, whether that's coming from, city levies like the education levy, or it's coming from private sector or philanthropy, that money should be controlled and dictated by the communities that it's supposed to impact so that we can have culturally responsive, self-determined solutions that are high impact happening. Because what we have seen is that lots of money, millions of dollars, we got big foundations, philanthropy like the Gates here, they're controlling these distribution of this money, and most of it's going to just white-led organizations. So really, they're kind of passing the money back and forth, and things aren't getting better for us. So we have to disrupt that and, again, come up with real solutions that move us towards equity.
Right.
Can I add to that?
No, of course. I was going to ask you, because also I know that you do a lot on the legislative side, and when politicians make promises, you know, and then a lot of times if there's no follow-through or accountability of it as well. But the floor is yours.
Yeah, you know, I think there are, so, you know, Brother White King is speaking to the importance of the land investment, because that's about our economic sustainability. It's about our opportunity to build equity so that the future generations can thrive. But we also know there's been a system built through the criminal punishment system, through the legislative system, whether we're talking about redlining or weed and seed, that have all been attempts to displace us from our neighborhoods. Even when we did own homes in the Central District, there were a lot of policies that made the Central District a place where we could not remain, whether it was the war on drugs and the way that weed and seed was used, or it was the ways in which property taxes, the leveraging of property taxes has worked in our region. It has effectively displaced and pushed out Black peoples. And so, you know, I think this is where the land demands also attach to our demands around Defund SPD, and you could extend those to another coalition we work with, Decriminalize Seattle, which has also been working on some of these legislative things, acknowledging that the way in which we construct our laws, even if Black folks gain access to land, if the law still functions the same, we might see our children continuing to be fed to the school to prison pipeline, which then decreases our ability to build that generational equity that we're seeking to achieve. So defunding the Seattle Police Department, defunding the criminal industrial complex, the criminal punishment system, is also about ensuring that these inequitable laws, and I would say white supremacist laws, that have been attacking Black and Native people since the inception of this country and pushing us into other forms of enslavement, play a role in why even once we gain access to land or economics, we're not able to keep a hold of that land and economics. So we need to actively be changing the ways in which our city invests in public safety and public health models that, to be quite frank, don't benefit everyone. They benefit white folks and property owners, and often displace and gentrify communities that have been historically Black. So as we're doing this work to get the land and to talk about equity in that format, we have to be talking about these investments. Like, we're spending $300,000 on some police officers whose method of public safety simply does not protect us, but also actually brutalizes us. I work on the south side of Seattle, where we're trying to get 2 pieces of land from the Department of Transportation to build a youth achievement center, because we know that in our work of dismantling the school to prison pipeline, if we cannot provide holistic services to young people, then no matter what land we get, if we're displaced from it every time we get it, we still aren't building that generational wealth or that capacity for our culture, for our people to thrive.
Right. And one of the things I want to be able to come back to you on is the defund, so we can get a better understanding from your side. I want to get through these clips from the mayor, so then we can actually focus on, as well as we have some other guests here. Daryl, I think that we'll go to number 1, and before we play this, White King, this is the clip right here where the mayor actually talks about the proposed transfer. The transfer is going on the way of Fire Station 6. I will say, let me find this text message. I did get a text message from someone in the mayor's office earlier today, and yeah, I should have had it ready for me. But basically what they're saying, and I'll let you answer on the other side of the clip, but what they're saying is that they've talked to you guys have done a walkthrough, they sent you a letter, they're supposed to have a meeting tomorrow. I'll see if I can find the exact words during the clip. This is number 1, Daryl. This is when I asked, this was June 12th, and this was the actual day that the mayor tweeted about transferring Fire Station 6 over to Africatown. Let's talk about something I know a lot about, and this is the Black community.
Yep.
This is, you know what I'm saying? First thing here is, well, actually, there's, let me put this in a different order. The big news today was the transfer of Fire Station 6 to Africatown Community Land Trust. Why was today the day for that? And, you know, what was the city's position or impetus to go ahead and make that transfer?
So we've been looking at that for a long time, as you know, and there's both Fire Station 6. We also want to move on the, as I said, the Central Area Senior Center. The vision there is not to just move it back to community, but to get it zoned so that there can be affordable housing for those seniors right there at the community center. So many of them, their families can't live in the Central District anymore, don't live in the Central District anymore, and we got to make sure that those people don't get displaced. So we've got a whole list of properties that we got from community that they want to look at that we really need to reinvest.
All right, so White King, you know, and like I said, that was June 12th. Since then, in the follow-up today, the mayor's office said that you guys have been in communication. They did a walkthrough. They sent a letter, and you're supposed to meet with him tomorrow. So that was their communication. We saw the clip there from June 12th. Now, one of the questions I definitely had is, what's the update from your side?
Yeah, the update is, as you said, this has been probably 7 years we've been working on the fire station, and 5 years ago it was voted by City Council to be a part of the Equitable Development Initiative as the initial project in the Central District, right? To be William Gross Center for Enterprise and Cultural Innovation, again, to connect our community, the brilliance, the ingenuity, the innovative genius that's always been here, because innovation is making a way out of no way, and that's what we've had to do constantly, time and time again here, and the entrepreneurial spirit, right, with the broader economic opportunities that exist in this region. And so that was, you know, back 2015, 2016, and it's just been dragged out, you know. And so again, getting back, that's something that should have been already done, because they've been parking meter-maid vehicles there for the past, 4 years, bringing no vitality, nothing to the community as far as economic, cultural, any of that, And so we found out on the 12th through the internet, right? So we were surprised to hear about it, but obviously always encouraged that we can have a positive step forward since that time. Again, we didn't have initially a timeline, and now the mayor has, worked to expedite it, as far as we understand, based on the communications that we've gotten in writing. Our architects, who we've been trying to get access, and our contractors for the past year, finally were able to do a walkthrough on Friday morning so that they could, price the cost of the initial improvements that need to be made, so that we can get in there and get our businesses and our, our community benefiting from that space. Right now it's sitting empty, is my understanding. And so, yes, we will be tomorrow morning meeting with the Office of Economic Development, Office of Planning and Community Development. Big shout out to, Sam Asefa and his staff there. They've always been, I think, striving to move this forward, but the politics above them were creating the barriers. And so we'll have that meeting to talk about moving forward and expediting, again, the access and the activation of the space, while the ownership transfer part is finalized. So we don't want to be, again, stuck in bureaucracy around, how does this, transferring this over in the title and whatever that has to go through with the city council, and the building sitting empty, and genius is going untapped, unharnessed, uncultivated in our community. So that's what we're pushing. We need people to continue to ask the questions, to create the urgency, so that we can move that forward immediately. And it's not just about, Fire Station 6 becoming William Gross Center, but really getting our cultural innovation district up and running. Because it's okay, for historic district and arts, but we don't want to be plaques, right? So we look at, the best way we can honor the past is by having, the future and the present count, living memorials. So we're not just looking at a painting of Jimi Hendrix or a mural, but there's a studio for a young Jimi Hendrix to go in and get active, not only in creating music, but also managing the business and the distribution of that content, which, again, black culture runs the world, right, in many ways. And so, but most of that economic benefit, we don't see it coming back to the communities where it's originated, whether that's here or New Orleans or the South Bronx or, you know, Compton, you know, these places that create this culture that is billions, trillions of dollars. We want to see the actual jobs and the ownership, you know, and the equity created in these same communities. And for us, that's the Central District and the South End and the Seattle.
Right. And Nikita, excuse me, my question for you is that Joaquin just mentioned 7 years. And, you know what I'm saying, it wasn't until June 12th and, you know, the protests were going on here. At that point, the Chaz was up and running. Why do you think that it took all of that for the city to act?
I mean, it's pressure. It's about the convergence. And this is where I think the history of what is going on is really important. You know, one of the questions you posted on Twitter was about whether or not the city was treating the Chop Chaz exclusive from the rest of what has been happening in terms of Black legacy. And I think reality is, if we think about Black uprising, Black liberation movements, this is not the first time that we've been in the streets. It's not the first time we've had demands. It's certainly not the first time that Africatown or Y King have been asking for properties to be returned back into the hands of Black folks to support equity. But I think reality is that there is a significant amount of pressure that has been mounted as a part of this movement, whether it's the consistent protest or the alignment of Black-led organizations under King County Equity Now, or even the presence of the CHOP here at the East Precinct. I think that that pressure has forced the city to have to grapple with the reality that either they're going to meet the demands of Black community, or there's going to be a sustained pressure that's going to continue to exist. And that's where I see, you know, there are elements of CHOP that maybe have forgotten where this started, but at the same time, the most powerful thing we can do is continue to align our movements around the demands of pay the fee, free the land, defund SPD, and invest in public health and public safety strategies that we as Black peoples know actually work to keep us all safe. So there is a serious pressure happening, and it's not happening just in Seattle. We're seeing it happening across the nation. And there's an immense convergence of economic justice movements and racial justice movements that I think are pushing us to a new precipice of Black liberation here in Seattle, but also nationally.
And speaking of that, because you just brought it up, and we'll get this last clip out of the way here. Oops, sorry about that. These guys, live TV, but they got it. Speaking of that, and you brought it up because I did put out a tweet there earlier, and this was we asked Mayor Durkin, because one of the things that I see, right, and I'll share it with you guys as just myself, the rest of the Converge team. Whether you ask Bobby Stills, whether you ask Eric Calligraphy, whether you ask Nikki, whether you ask some of our other producers that are on the field, when we get a sense right here in the CHOP, and I'm not saying it's coming from you guys at King County Equity Now, but we get a sense that it's like all the Black people, or a good amount of Black people or Black organizations, are all putting their bid into the CHOP pot, literally. And it's like, well, man, you know what? If the mayor has the, you know, if this demand or that demand in the CHOP and it's related to Black, you know, to legacy Black community, or, you know, however it want to be, we see a lot of bids really going in. I mean, we talked to quite a lot of people, some organizations that we know and we've heard of, some other organizations that we have not. But it's almost like all the Black people are vying for a bid. You know what I'm saying? And their demands, and it's tied to the CHOP. But I'll be honest with you. When I talked to Mayor Durkin back on June 12th, I asked her specifically, I said, do you see the issues in the legacy Black community and their demands, and the issues here with the demands then it was the Chaz, do you see them as being together? You know what I'm saying? She said that they were not exclusive. And she said there's even more issues beyond just the legacy Black community and, you know, the issues of the Chaz, now the CHOP. Daryl, if you could play clip number 3 for us. For you, is the issue in Chaz, the East Precinct, and what's going on Capitol Hill, and the issues in the black community, do you see those as two separate issues, or do you see that as one issue? And also in that, are you in your negotiations, say with the black community, are you looking for like this 2-for-1 solution or this silver bullet that like, okay, well, we're working with this group or these people in the black community with the hopes that, you know, in appeasing them or coming to a resolution, that also frees up this situation in the Chaz, or is it two different things for you?
So I think it's more than two different things, and it's in some ways it's not really negotiation; it's listening, and it's saying, okay, these are real issues that people have, real pain, real concerns. How do we take that and channel it to our city? And how do we make sure that what we can't do, others can? And you hear all different things. I mean, you've seen at the barricades, some of the folks who aren't from the black community are there for very different reasons.
It's very interesting. And
yeah.
I've talked about that.
Exactly. You've talked about it a lot in your stream, and I think it's right. And you've heard that even in Seattle as different people have taken the microphone to make this a movement about them. And I think that is, this one has got to be centered on what does the black community want and need right now, and how do we make sure that we are doing the actions we take are in full knowledge and acknowledgement of the systemic racism that has been built into the system, and that's got to be the starting point, and that means listening first.
So again, we hear Mayor Durkin. This was June 12th. This was, we got a cough drop here. This was when it was still called the Chaz. It's now the CHOP, but she hasn't made any kind of statement that said anything different. She said right there that the issues in the legacy black community, and for people who might not be from Seattle or outside Seattle or new to the stream, we're talking about the Central District of Seattle, part of the South End of Seattle. But when you talk about real deal legacy, you're talking about the Central District of Seattle. It's evolved over the years, of course, is the South End of Seattle as well. She said that those issues that are there, basically, you know, and I'm from the Central District, you know, James A. Garfield High School. The issues that you talk about, like Fire Station 6, 7 years, they've been talking about things like that, are different and should be dealt with differently. I think that there's probably some overlap because people over here in the CHOP, they say defund the police. We're going to talk to you about that in a second. I think there's probably some overlap in quite a few issues. But she said that they're separate. How do you feel about that?
Well, we don't, it's very, you know, I think simple. We're dealing with a Jim Crow apartheid reality in Seattle, in Martin Luther King County, the only county I think named after Martin Luther King in the nation, and in this nation, because from the roots, it was about the knee on the neck of the indigenous people that was here, taking their land, coming to Africa, looting the black people, the Africans, bringing them here, making them work the land, keeping your knee on the neck to make them act accordingly, and all of the policies that came after that, whether it was the black codes, whether it was redlining, whether it was, you know, weaponizing highways and running them through black, you know, vibrant communities and economic districts, whether it was, you know, divestment, benign neglect under Moynihan and Nixon, whether it was, you know, war on drugs under Reagan and defunding programs and arts and all of this in communities, whether it was weed and seed. This is just a persistent knee on the neck, whether it was predatory lending, you know. So all of these things, you know, compound, you know, compounding interest working against us, right? Just like compounding interest for the people that got the wealth from us has been working for them through generations, right? And so we know also that over-policing, police violence, police terrorism go hand in hand with gentrification and displacement and predatory development, right? Broken windows policies, stop and frisk, and things of that nature. And so this is what produces the situations of Eric Garner, you know, trying to make some money, as they said, selling cigarettes, or Alton Sterling in Louisiana selling CDs, or, you know, recently George Floyd in Minneapolis, which they also said was based on an economic issue of some money. And so, again, these things are connected. So in the uprising and the response to the very visible lynching of George Floyd recently brought the people out into the streets. So then to separate that from the fact that, you know, black Communities need to have access to the resources to grow and thrive and want to be free to live and not be, molested and have their and harassed and terrorized and have their human rights violated by agents of the state in their communities. Those things are intertwined, right? That's, I think, why the people came out. And really, the Seattle Police Department and the response to the people expressing their First Amendment rights to assemble and grieve government is what created the whole situation. They're the ones that, blocked off the street and made this a place and created a barricade and all that. They created that and stopped the people right here that then blossomed into this. And then the media added on and amplified that, and that's what created it. Really was the police and the media made what came to be known as Chaz and Chop, which was really people coming into the street to support the black community being able to have their human rights respected and to have equity, right? And so to then separate it, I don't know exactly how you do that, because if we were having our rights respected and we had our equity, the people wouldn't be in the street.
Well, So let me ask you a different question then. If the mayor was to say, okay, everything that the demands of whatever group over here gives her, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, okay, they're like, Mayor, if you grant these demands or give up the East Precinct where we're going to leave and everything else, if she does that, do you feel that the demands or the needs of the legacy black community of Seattle would have been met? Because that's kind of what I'm saying here is like our top demands, the legacy black community demands. I know that there's overlap. Like defund is one of the overlaps. My understanding is, every time I've been here, spoke with people, information has been distributed about, what's going on in the fronts in the community. Because there's many fronts to the battle, right? This is one front line that was, again, made by the SPD's response to the people and the media's amplification of the terrorism of the protesters created this as a very visible front. That never stopped the fronts that were in the Central District that have been being fought on for many years, the fronts that are in, the front lines in the South End. So that never stopped those fronts. And I think from my understanding and from what I've seen, most of the issues of the black community are tied to that. They're saying defund the police and reinvest in the community in effective community safety strategies, which are based in economic development, and access to, public safety, et cetera, et cetera. More police, militarized police with bad attitudes, poor de-escalation skills is not what makes Laurelhurst a safer community or makes Broadmoor a safer community, or police in schools is not what makes Lakeside a good school, right? It's the resources that are present in those schools or the economics that are present in those communities that allow them to be economically sustainable, which is what makes them more safe. And when they have a problem now, when they have an opioid, epidemic, they're considering that as a public safety, a public health issue, and not a criminal issue, which is how they address crack with the war on drugs. We're not hearing a war on drugs with opioids. We're hearing public health strategies to resolve it because it's another demographic that's being affected by it.
Right. And I would just add to that, I think the mayor is being disingenuous. So two things. One thing I heard from Brother White King is there's a history of uprisings. This is not the first time. And CHOP exists because it is built upon that history of uprisings, as well as a convergence of many things that happened at this particular location. But also, when you see who the mayor is choosing to meet with, I think she is disingenuously actually elevating the demands of the community she knows has the least amount of leverage right now in terms of relationship to longstanding black community and black organizers, and choosing those organizers that both have the least amount of leverage and the least amount of knowledge about how to be a part of this political game and have political strategy. It is a negotiation. Black people have been in negotiation for a long time in this city of trying to get the city, force the city, push the city to respond to our demands. These demands are not new, but when she chooses to sit at the table with folks that she knows, because they've said it, are not from the area, are not doing work in the area, are not rooted in community so that they have deep knowledge of what does it mean to return the land, to pay the fee, and what does defunding SPD and what are the appropriate investments for us. she's actually being disingenuous by saying that she thinks those two legacies are separated, because she's actually choosing to disorganize intentionally rather than meet with those who she knows do have longstanding work and legacy in the community.
The interesting thing is that each time when she's in the meeting, she speaks to us, but we didn't know about the meeting, you know, but she speaks about, you know, what's going on.
Let me just stop you right there, because, you know, found myself in an awkward position, you know, two days ago. I mean, what a crazy day. The SDOT came in 5:30 in the morning. Thought I was going to be able to sleep in, but, you know, I was saying, this is why we're here. And, you know, we saw basically CHOP repel the city coming in here. And, you know, I would think, so I have to assume that's the chief executive of the city. I would have to assume that she saw the optics that everybody else saw. The optics that we saw was that the SDOT came to remove everything. The protesters that were here, small in numbers, but the protesters that were here, they were just like, man, I was just laid out in front of a bulldozer, but laid out in front of a truck, and let's do what we do. And, you know, that jammed up everything. The city of Seattle retreated out of the CHOP 6 hours later with the world's media here. I mean, this is the thing, and that's why, you know, I came out and briefed the press, because I felt there was the gravity of the meeting. This was because the city came to remove the bulldozer, remove the barricades. They got pushed out, and then she's meeting with the protesters. And like I said, I don't know if they realized, like, literally the whole world's media was sitting outside of First AME Church. And that's why I felt the need to observe and come and be like, man, I said officially how you know, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, of course, you know, I made my observation. But that was big. You know, having that meeting right there with the whole world right there, you know what I'm saying, kind of watching was big. And I go to the point of, like, in that meeting, what came up was Africa Town. It came up, you know what I'm saying, Fire Station 6, investment in Africa Town Plaza, Liberty Bank building came up, you know, the proposed $100 million and everything else. And to what you just said is, like, Africa Town's name comes up in the conversation with others, but how often is a conversation being had with Africa Town?
Or at the table with everyone else. I mean, there's an easy way to do this. We don't need any closed-door meetings. We can bring it out in the spirit of democracy, because we're talking about everybody's tax dollars, right? We can bring this out into public, you know, viewing of why are we proposing these things. Right? These are solutions. These are not just, you know, random personal, you know, projects. These are best practices, solutions that have solved problems for other people. The things that are happening in other communities that allow those communities, again, to grow and thrive. Access to capital. I mean, these are not, you know, there's nothing that we need to be in a closed door meeting really to address. The King County Equity Now demands solutions, I really should say solutions, are very clear for the world to see at kingcountyequitynow.com. All the mayor, the governor, the King County executive, all they need to do is give a weekly update to the city, the county, the citizens of the progress that they're making, or if they have somehow come up with some better solutions that they would like to propose to the impacted communities. That's how we can move forward. But we don't need to have 20 different meetings. That's inefficient use of time and causes a lot of confusion.
Right. And so my question to you, Nikita, is why do you think? Now, we've seen this and everything else, and I mean, the resources are there. Yeah, we're happy to stream all kinds of stuff, but even other people, the city has technology. The city, Seattle TV, they actually do a really good job on things. Why is it that it's this group, this group, this group, this group, and why not, you know what I'm saying, bring, like you said, bring everybody here to the table? Because to be honest with you, you know, when we talk to most different groups that are out there, one, there's already a lot of overlap. So it's already a lot of places where things are connected. Two, there really is, and it's a lot going on. There's some groups that be like, oh, word? We ain't even know about Fire Station 6. That's dope. You see what I'm saying? or, these kind of things. Why is it that you think that the mayor hasn't brought, okay, if there is 1, 2, whatever, groups, why isn't there at one table that working groups or, however people resolve these kind of issues? Why is it so fragmented?
Well, first of all, I would say on our end, it's far less fragmented than it is on their end. I mean, we are actively organizing a coalition, a growing coalition of Black-led organizations and Black organizers. Personally, I believe it's about disorganization. White supremacy has actively tried to disorganize our efforts time and time again. And by picking those organizers they know do not have long-standing relationship or even the history that our elders passed down to us, then they can go for the lowest hanging fruit and not have to deal with the really deep issues.
And let me just stop you right there. And one of the things that I saw, and I actually wrote about it when you talk about the lowest hanging fruit, when I saw the demands that were there the other day. You know what I'm saying? And I think Mayor Durkin Mayor Durkin had an opportunity to be like, something ain't right here, but she went another direction. Oh yeah, we've already done this, it's a wrap.
But this is where we have seen the city of Seattle and King County be disingenuous in meeting the needs, the solutions that community is bringing forward, has brought forward before. I mean, King just explained, the fight for Fire Station 6 is 7 years long, right? We're still trying to get SBI back. I mean, there are so many discussions that have been happening for a long time. The mayor is well aware. I was a part of the campaign trail. I know who all she met with because she met with most of the same people I met with. She's actively choosing not to be in transparent and accountable conversation with those folks she knows have deep relationships in community. And I say transparent and accountable because we've already seen an immense amount of disorganization. And in order to make sure that we keep healthy relationships within our community, we want to make sure it's transparent and accountable. We want people to know what our moves and our motions are so that they can trust the work that's happening through King County Equity Now and happening with Decrim Seattle and happening with Africatown, because there's nothing secret about it. Like King said, the solutions are on the website. We just need a progress report.
Right. Fantastic. So we're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, and I know that we have some other representatives that are out there representing different parts of King County Equity Now, but we want to talk to you about what's going on with Defund and some of the youth. And, of course, we want to talk about the key points of the, what you talk about land. Maybe you can get more specific with it and everything else. You're watching Community Voices. This is with King County Equity Now.
Something. Let's bring this down. Let's bring this shit down. So we see him grabbing the umbrella. There's the spray. There's the spray. There's the spray. It's on now. It's on. These precincts, they're losing control.
All right, welcome back to Community Voices, King County Equity Now. Still here with our guest, K.Y. King Garrett and Nikita Oliver. You know what I'm saying? It's good to see you, Nikita, by the way. I've been seeing this guy for a long time. I've been trying to catch up with Nikita. Man, you stay on the move.
Got to. We got work to do. You know what I'm saying?
You man. And what we saying the other day, I got to walk these dogs so we can live. You know what I'm saying? And you stay busy. So this segment right here, we wanted to get more into the actual, what you said, solutions of King County Equity Now. And I know you're the big land guy, clearly, Africa Town Community Land Trust. So talk about what land looks like and the concept of land and ownership looks like in King County Equity Now.
Again, KingCountyEquityNow.com to get to the specifics, because we're not going to be able to get through every project here. But in general, again, the two main points are land, particularly that public sector land that's underutilized right now, transferring that over immediately to be repurposed and access to the capital to develop it so our businesses can get in there, so our contractors could actually build it, create jobs in the community. And the other main point is control over the resources that are supposed to impact our community. When we're talking about land, number one, we need a moratorium on predatory development, and that's all development that's not consistent with the equitable development goals that have already been laid out by the city and the county. We need a moratorium on that. Press pause on all of that, and then prioritize equitable development on these sites initially from the city, but then also we need, the corporate predatory developers to divest from their, practices such as, Vulcan on 23rd and Jackson, and, you got 23rd and Union, and you got other projects, the Kiro, former assisted living.
Vulcan as a corporate predatory. Sorry about that. Thanks, Nikki. Why do you refer to Vulcan as a corporate predatory developer?
Well, they looked at land that had been artificially depressed in the black community over the generations through systemic policies and practices as, an opportunity to come in and, as speculators and do a development to make profit off of the development, right? Just for the sake of basically making profit, because obviously Vulcan, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, doesn't need a project in the Central District or Yesler Terrace. If they don't do the project, it's not going to affect their lives, right? They're not like, community-based, landowner that has a duplex or a fourplex, and this is just basically part of how they, actually live, right? This is just looking for preying on, distressed properties, distressed communities, and seeing how you can make a profit by, developing that in a way that displaces the community. So the community that's been there can't afford to live when it's $3,000 for a studio, because these communities have been systematically kept out of the economic opportunities that are now allowing people to pay these prices and driving the costs up, right? So this is why we say, when we're talking about speculators, flippers, such as on a smaller scale, Bucks Buys Houses, which you did a, story on related to these predatory developers on a residential side coming in, pressuring our senior landowners, property owners who may be on a fixed income while the property taxes are going up, and trying to get them to sell their property low because, again, the redlining still exists. We're not seeing our property owners get access to the capital to develop. They're only given the opportunity to sell, and most often they're selling under market because predatory developers are coming in and getting their properties off market through various different manipulation techniques. And so, again, this is what we're saying about the land, prioritizing that. Some of those projects include Seattle Vocational Institute, bringing that in so it's a part of this campus of innovation and, again, bringing transparency, resetting that whole process around how that is being brought into our community. So it's a community-driven, community-led process, not from the State Department of Commerce and, Sharon Tomiko Santos, our state representative, but from the community, which we participated in at one time, and then they went another way. The former Branch Villa or Leon Sullivan Assisted Living Center, which was recently taken over by the state of Washington, right? So getting that, again, back into black ownership, serving, black seniors, assisted living. There's many properties. There's, the SHA, maintenance facility that was not even supposed to be in the community that's located on 20 Martin Luther King and Dearborn.
And when you say for other people who might not be aware, you're talking about Sound Transit?
No, Seattle Housing Authority,
Seattle Housing
right?
Authority.
Which again
SHA.
also sold so much of the property in Yesler Terrace, which was a historical public housing project, into the private sector again. You know, so this is more land going into.
That was one of the first public housing
integrated in the world. I mean, in the nation.
In the nation.
Integrated. First
and
integrated.
Seattle Housing Authority sold that off to private investors.
Right. So these are some of the things that we're talking about. Again, if we have a housing crisis, right, affordable housing crisis, then why would the public housing agency be selling land into the private market to create housing that's unaffordable and doesn't solve this problem? So these are some of the things that have been happening, you know, kind of behind the scenes, and we need to just bring a light to that and say, again, the citizens of Seattle deserve to have a better return on the assets and resources that they have. That's really what we're talking about, because a lot of the spending and the strategies and these things are being influenced by, again, these, you know, predatory developers and the corporate interests that are paying no taxes but benefiting handsomely on a city that they didn't actually create, right? It took a lot that made this city what it is to be an attractive city. Some of it none of us made because it's just based on the natural lay of the land. But, you know, this is why everything, again, starts with land, because we need space to exist, to do the things and have the solutions implemented for, again, community to grow and thrive in place and be a part of the future of Seattle and have some movement towards equity, because currently we're not on that trajectory. Currently we are in a Jim Crow apartheid reality, and how could that be in Martin Luther King Jr. County, Chief Seattle City? Like, we you know, I don't think majority of the people really want that, but again, it's not in your face. But when you look at the numbers, I think what Jay-Z said, you know, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And when you look at every statistic, such as the median income of the average white family being $105,000 and for the black being $42,500. So we're not even at the 3/5 of a man, you know, that the Constitution put us at. We're not even at 66% or anything like that. That's less than 50%, and that's apartheid, right? And now what we see is, again, when we talk about apartheid, we're literally saying that. In South Africa, you had shanty towns. Now, in the Central District, you have what they call tiny homes, right? What is that but a shanty? Right, and black people are now being relegated to either living in a shanty village or subsidized housing, you know, like Liberty Bank building, when this was a community of owners, right? And that ownership is being lost, and a lot of that is happening through systemic practices, and that's what we want to address, again, on the equity land side of things.
Right. And now, Nikita, I wanted to turn to you kind of on two things. First was defund the police, and then the second being some of the youth initiatives. Now, I'll hear from you as you explain defund the police, but I talked to Rial Johnson. He was out here probably 10 days ago, and the way that he explained defund the police was that the public makes an investment in public safety. And what they're saying is that now the public doesn't feel that they're getting the return on investment in public safety, the money that they're giving, and so now they want to reallocate the budget to basically reflect that, and the funds that should go into public safety go there, and other funds should go somewhere else. I only bring that up because it was like one of the most like boom, you know, way to be able to understand, because it kind of does a disservice to defund the police as well when it's like defund the police and then nobody can explain anything beyond that. And you know, for a lot of people as well, defund the police. I was like, oh, okay, it's zero budget, you know. But what he said was that he feels the return on investment in public safety isn't there, so they want to readjust the budget accordingly based upon the return that they're getting in public safety.
Yeah, I don't think that's an inaccurate depiction of it. I mean, reality is you can't talk about defund the police without also talking about the demand to invest in public health and public safety strategies that work for everyone. Right now, police as it's set up works for a very small percentage of people. It works for property owners and white folks who feel comfortable with police. But if you live on the south side of Seattle, where I live, where our community is over-policed and yet we're not safer. In fact, we are less safe. then defunding the police is a significant strategy. But defund the police is a part of a longer-term strategy of decriminalization that's people have been putting forward in Seattle. Decriminalize Seattle, which you can follow on Instagram, has been working with groups like No New Youth Jail and Block the Bunker since 2012, acknowledging that police are a part of a system of oppression and exploitation that have been attacking Black and Native people since the inception of this country, right? Treating us as property, and to go grab us, bring us back to a property owner, that still exists. It exists through the 13th Amendment, so long as a person has been convicted of a crime that can be placed in involuntary servitude. So there is a whole system from police to courts to jails and prisons that has to be addressed. We are making less than half of what white families are making in the city, and yet Black folks make up nearly half of who's involved in the criminal punishment system. There's a direct correlation between having access to economic support and employment and opportunity to then not having that access, being prevented from having access, and seeing people forced into the school to prison pipeline. This is not a myth, it's a real thing. So when we talk about defunding the police, we need to think about it within the history of organizing that's happened, that since 2012, we were saying no new what? No new youth jail, because we knew that so long as our young people continue to be forced into the prison industrial complex, we will continue to not see a return on investment because that stifles that investment. So defund the police is a part of a broader reaching strategy. But then, based on what Rial is saying, we're not getting a return on our investment. We're spending $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 on officers that actually brutalize people in our community. I can't tell you the number of people who have said, I called the police for help and they came and they arrested me. Charlene Lyles is a huge example of someone who lived in a housing development that was supposed to support mothers like her, and when she called for help, the police murdered her. So what we really want to see is, from that $410 million budget, an investment in public health and public safety strategies we know serve all communities, Black and Native communities included. This is knowing that when people call 911, they don't need a person with a badge and a gun showing up 99% of the time. What they need is crisis prevention services. This also includes knowing that there are many quote-unquote crimes, especially crimes of survival or crimes of poverty, that if we invested in affordable housing, because we've been in a state of emergency for over 5 years, that if we invested in affordable housing, employment and opportunity, that we made sure people had access to mental health services, cultural spaces where we could do much needed healing work, but also affirmation work, you would see less and less people interacting with the criminal punishment system at all. So it is calling out the fact that our investment in police is misguided, misdirected, and actually invests in this continued system of oppression, and very intentionally is targeted at Black and Native peoples. There are tons of organizations in our city that have been actively doing the work of building these alternatives. We have things like Creative Justice, Community Passageways, Choose 180, which is directed on young people. How do we divert them out of the criminal punishment system? How do we actively dismantle the school to prison pipeline? And one of the projects we've been working on that attaches this land concept that Wyking was talking about to the Defund the Police is a Youth Achievement Center.
Right, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. Well, Wyking kind of brought up the land in general. Maybe you could put some meat on the bones as to what the community would want to do with some of that land.
Yeah, so there are 2 plots of land on the south side of Seattle next to the Columbia City Light Rail Station. And the goal is to build holistic, supportive housing for young people that are both trying to avoid the criminal punishment system and those who are also working to liberate themselves from that system, that would provide places for young people to live. We know there are over 5,000 youth in the Seattle Public Schools that are experiencing homelessness or housing instability.
How many?
Over 5,000. There are a lot of young people that don't have homes.
Schools?
Yes, that are housing unstable. It is a huge crisis. There are young people that are currently in the youth detention center who are not able to leave because they don't have a stable home to go to. So maybe where the court would allow them to exit on electronic monitoring, they're not able to do that because for whatever reason, they don't have a home that can support the capacity for them to exit that cage. We have young people who have been held, who the court wouldn't even put on EM, if they had a place to go, but they don't have anywhere to go. There may be foster care youth or their youth whose families are housing unstable. And so by providing a place where those youth can have homes, or maybe their families can have homes, by providing reentry services, we have many young people ages 18 to 24 who come out of the Department of Corrections and they find themselves homeless. What are you going to do when you're homeless? You don't have an ID, you don't have access to employment and education. The likelihood of you recidivating, of you going back to the only lifestyle that society is allowed to provide you with economic opportunity, you're going to have to make that choice. We force people back into the prison industrial complex. So this facility would provide space for young people to live, but more importantly, working with Africatown, we can work with young people to build a space that is also culturally supportive, culturally appropriate, that serves Black community in a way that allows us to have our identities affirmed, for us to have our relationships brought together. One thing that we're talking about is most housing that families can access actually breaks the family apart. We want to build a facility that uplifts the Black family as important as a way of building young people's internal and spiritual efficacy, and supports the relationship between families. And having educational services, mental health services, doctors, all those things in one space, so people don't have to go to 12 different stops, get 12 different vouchers just to be able to receive services that make us holistically whole. It is about creating a space where Black folks can be healthy and thriving, and doing that in the South End. We want to see that in a community where we've experienced immense amounts of violent displacement and gentrification, and we want to continue to do the work of making these places that maybe right now we exist as a museum. We want to make sure we get to exist as 3D flesh and blood people in the neighborhoods that we've made viable with our culture and our brilliance.
I just want to add to that, that land piece. Today we were in Skyway. Skyway is currently probably the largest Black community that exists. It's majority Black, 31%.
It's unincorporated.
It's unincorporated, and we were supporting the young leaders there that are stepping up to, again, identify that, this community is at risk of displacement as the tsunami of, gentrification and predatory development moves from the CD to the South End and then the Skyway. So, again, supporting that community, that Black community, which is a majority, Black community, 31%, and global majority by far, 70% when you include, or close to 80% when you include the Asian, community that's there, as well as the Hispanic community is there. So how to, again, take the strategies and the things that we've learned working in the Central District and share that with, the extended branch of our community that has, settled there to help fortify it to build, a thriving Black community, the Black Wall Street, the Africatown right there in Skyway. So again, the land, is the underpinning of, everything that happens on the land. Whoever controls the land and owns the land controls what happened on the land, and in the space. And for every activity, you need space. We need space to heal. We need space to build. We need space to grow.
Right. All right. What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to hear from Rel B. Free and Elijah Lewis on different aspects of King County Equity Now. You are watching Community Voices. welcome back to Community Voices. Today we're talking with King County Equity Now. We just saw K.Y. King Garrett and Nikita Oliver, and now we set change here, so to speak. We've got Tay May, we've got Relby Free, and we've also got Elijah Lewis. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Since you got the mic, you know what I'm saying, let's start over there with you, Tay May, and representing Wanawari. So tell us where you and Wanawari fit into King County Equity Now.
Wanawari fits into the coalition directly because Wanawari is a part of an estate that is a legacy family, which is my family. Frank Green, which is my great-grandfather, who was a sharecropper, moved up here, bought a lot of property in what was before, it wasn't even redlined, it was a neighborhood with no niggers and no Jews. And so from there, he bought up to a little bit more than 8+ properties. He also owned a woodlot business enterprise on 23rd and Cherry, which gave a lot of businesses to the community. Also Deacon at Mount Zion. So him starting a legacy in Seattle in the Central District, housing a lot of families. A lot of families come up to us and they're just astonished that we're still in the Central District after pretty much the rape and the pillaging of our neighborhoods. There's only one other black family on our block. We are down to 3 properties from 8. So that shows that gentrification has taken its toll on my family as well. But what we decided to do, instead of selling another property, which would have been 911, which is now Wanawari, we made a decision to open the space up to the community, to transform it into a black visual art space, to give a voice and to give a space to black artists in Seattle that contribute to a lot of culture change, that contribute to understanding what's current and happening in the community. Without Wanawari, we would have had to sell that property, which would have been another notch in, the fear of, will we be displaced? Will we have to leave? After our family has literally given equity to that community, blood, sweat, and tears. It's very disheartening. It's anxiety-driven to see your neighborhood literally transform in front of your eyes. And so Wanawari is an act of rebellion to say, we get your letters, we get the solicitation of, $500,000 in cash, $1 million in cash will buy your property, but we're not going anywhere. Because without my grandfather being one of the first families to move into that neighborhood, it wouldn't have planted the seed of the historic and the legacy of all the black families that then later came and also brought their businesses and also brought their children. For me to even be here today, to have the honor to speak to you and have so much experience in Seattle through Langston Hughes, through Odessa Brown, through Africatown. These are the staples in the community that actually produce success, amongst ourselves, that produce success in our greater community. Wanawari is just about maintaining your land, maintaining your property.
So my question for you then is, Wanawari is supporting King County Equity Now because of King County Equity Now's stance about equity in property and their stance against gentrification and renewal of the Central District? Absolutely.
Wanawari is essentially a product of that. We didn't ask permission to do so. We just did it. And so we're actually looking to grow in the blueprint of how do we also help other black families who own property in Seattle, like the elders who don't know what to do, who are not familiar with being innovative with Airbnb, who are not innovative or on technology to bringing outside resources to make sure you can stay in your home. There are other ways you can bring in revenue, so you can compete with the fact that you're on a fixed income, but now you have to sustain these new taxes and all these other things, your mortgage or whatever the case may be. So it was an easy, decision to be a part of the coalition because, again, we didn't ask permission to do so. We're already doing the work.
Okay, and we'll go over here to my right to this young man, Elijah Lewis. He's somebody that's actually I've seen wear a lot of hats around the community. Were you 19, 20? You're a young guy.
20 years old.
20 years old, man, and you've got all kinds of different ventures going. A young entrepreneur. I do know that, like myself. You got a company, Flourish Financial. You're 20 years old. Why at 20 years old as an entrepreneur are you supporting King County Equity Now?
Man, King County Equity Now means a lot of different things for me. It, for one, means equity. For our community, we've been pushed out of the, Central District and the South End as well. And there's not a lot of equity within our community, but there's not a lot of equity within business ownership for young entrepreneurs like myself. And so we are looking for, resources. We're looking for help. We're looking for mentors. And in a regular community that, we've been displaced to, we cannot find that to help black young entrepreneurs like myself. And King County Equity Now is really demanding, resources, land, and, co-working spaces and stuff that we can actually do those things and make those things happen within our communities.
So would you say then that when I look at, and I'll be honest with you, man, I've looked at so many different things, but in King County Equity Now, one of the things that I guess even why King brought up is the things like the William Gross Center for Cultural Innovation, when you talked about a working space and places for incubation and everything else. Are you trying to see more of that then across Seattle, across King County?
Absolutely. That is a lifeline for an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs within 5 years, they either, don't successfully run their business, they go bankrupt, or they're going to grow their business to the next level. So within the first 5 years, especially with young entrepreneurs like myself who do not see the representation within their community, do not see the representation within their, school systems, it is very important for a center like the William Gross Center to be in each and every community that has, black young entrepreneurs.
So you'd like to see a William Gross Center in, say, like the South End?
In the South End, Skyway, right. Renton, places that we've been displaced, places that we are forced to live, and we don't feel like there is help within that.
All right. And Rel Be Free, you know what I'm saying? I don't have my self-bio like I do right here, Elijah, you know what I'm saying? So you need to tell everybody, just quickly, because we're short on time, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about why you're supporting King County Equity Now.
Nah, I don't even really got to need a description for myself because, peace to the elders, peace to the youth that aren't able to be in this space. My organizing is centered out the South End, and that's pretty much all you need to know about me, is that I center my organizing in the South End with young black folks, like this young man to my right, like the homies that were up here earlier. And my affiliation with King County Equity Now, I just want to remind us, too, that it's an umbrella that encapsulates a lot. And every time you have some speakers in any space, we're representing a fraction of the organizing. And so King County Equity Now is one particular effort and strategy to get towards this greater demand that, as we've heard before, is a legacy. My great uncle, Bob Summarize, and Helen Summarize, based out of Seattle, they've been organizing. We think about our elders that have come before us, your family members, you know what I'm saying? None of these things are new. None of the things that we're asking for is new. I think something that's interesting to think about is the Black Panthers 10-point program. You look at every single one of them 10 points, and they're exactly what we're talking about today. And that's why we're representing King County Equity Now. And I know we keep using the branding and all that, but it's much bigger than that. And I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost.
If you want a message out,
absolutely.
You got to repeat the message. I'm in marketing, so it's okay to keep saying it.
And like I said, that's a piece of it. But I don't want that to get lost. I don't want that to get lost in that it's an affiliation, that it's a brand, because it's a representation of the diversity, of the multiplicity that is represented within King County Equity Now. And so people may hear it like individualistically, but it's actually, like why King mentioned, it's a coalition. And so personally, I organize with groups like Wall Block, Washington Building Leaders of Change, Decriminalize Seattle, the Rainier Beach Action Coalition, Seattle People's Party, the Black Elephant Party. These are all organizations.
And so all of these organizations claim you as well.
Yep. Hell
yeah.
It's
live TV. We get a lot of people in here who are like, man, I'm this, and that. Hey, every once in a while we be pulling some cards.
You don't got to worry about that with me, bro.
Okay.
Don't trip.
All right.
Yeah, and it's not, like I said, it's not about me. That's why I'm not coming for a description.
Right.
I'm coming for the work. And so when you ask me what I'm going to talk about, I said I'm going to talk about building and dismantling. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about a movement, we need builders and we need dismantlers. And I believe that what's happening here in CHOP is an example of what dismantling can look like. Now, people want to criticize the disorganization. I would say it's just decentralized. I would say that it's one front line. People can be like, oh, I've been on CHOP every single day. Like, look, bro, it's been 400 years. Your little month on the front line don't mean shit to the fact that we've been in this movement for years before a lot of people got involved in it. And so that's not shade. In fact, that's saying, let's connect what's happening to the historical movements that have been happening. I think that that's what people are doing. I think that's what a lot of organizers, new organizers, seasoned organizers are doing. I think tapping in the young folk, tapping in the elders, making sure that we're centering our black, queer, trans queens that have been putting in work and not been getting the airtime, not been getting the attention. I think definitely making sure that our messages and the movements forward center them and their experiences. That's how we're going to make this a different movement. Because at the end of the day, it's not the 60s no more. But you see niggas trying to do the same shit we saw in the 60s. It's not going to work. We need to try some new tactics, and that's what King County Equity Now is about, is we're getting at this economic piece. Because we're living in racialized capitalism. So we could solve the racial problem, and we still going to have capitalism, economic oppression. And so I think that the intersection of everything that everybody's been speaking about is exactly what this movement is about and for. Real shit.
All right. Well, you heard it right here. We're going to take a break. Before we take the break, though, I will say this, is that there are quite a, you know, I'm in media, but I was a day one guy too. Yep. But, you know, there are a lot of protesters here that are on day one. And, you know, historically speaking in Seattle, like this wasn't the first occupation or the last. You know, we can go back, you know, some years ago, it was 20 some odd, 23 years ago, even longer, where Omari Tahir. And they actually occupied the Coleman Building, which now today people call the Northwest African American Museum. You are watching Community Voices. We'll be right back.
Something. Let's bring this down. Let's bring this shit down. So we see him grabbing the umbrella. There's the spray. There's the spray. There's the spray. It's on now. It's on. These precincts, they're losing control. Well,
welcome back to Community Voices. Again, Omari Salisbury. We've remixed the set one more time, joined back again by Nikita Oliver and White King Garrett. We've only got a few minutes left. We actually, you know, the live director is on my head because we promised a 1 hour show, and I'm sure we're well after it. But, you know, it's important that we, you know, with a platform that we let people speak and, you know what I'm saying, and complete their thoughts and everything else. And, you know, for us, you know, paying some overtime as opposed to people actually getting their thoughts out. It's, man, let's pay the overtime and let's let people speak. That being said, though, I only got a few minutes left here. We'll start with you, Nikita. Any last words, call to action, things like that?
Yeah, I really want to encourage folks to, first and foremost, remember the demands. There's a lot of conversation about who is the leader, who's doing what work. Y'all just heard Rel Be Free talk about some of y'all are really new to this movement, and there are people, like King Garrett, like the Coach Dom Davises of the world, like the Rel Be Frees, the Gregory Davises, who have been doing this work for a very long time and have put forth demands that we know will uplift and undergird the Black community. And I think no matter what we do, as long as at every turn we're bringing those demands back to the forefront of the conversation and keeping that pressure up and understanding the political analysis around that. Like, I can't emphasize how important it is for people to do their homework, get to know the history, get to know the reason why, so that the demands actually have a point to you. They make sense. But so long as the demands that King County Equity Now and Decriminalize Seattle are bringing to the forefront continue to be the conversation, then I do actually believe that in this moment, this very unique moment, we can make a significant leap forward. So I ask people to sign the petitions from King County Equity Now, follow the website, follow the Instagram, follow Decriminalize Seattle on Instagram. And as we're putting out calls to action, as we move into a participatory budgeting process, because we know that defunding SPD, this money's not going to redistribute itself, and we certainly don't want unaccountable electeds deciding what that redistribution looks like. We're going to need community-based support to be actively forcing the powers that be to respond to a community-based participatory budget, to be responding to making sure that this land we're requiring be put back into our hands happens in a timely fashion. So follow those accounts, follow the action calls, keep the demands at the forefront of everything that we're doing.
All right. White King, any last words?
I'm going to just echo, put the platforms in front of personalities. Platform before the personality. That's what's important, right? What's the platform? Because we can all stand on that. And for King County Equity Now, go to the website, kingcountyequitynow.com. It's a growing coalition and a living document, right? Because we're looking at, again, equity in every area. We have some starts, but if you're in the education field, help develop that educational equity platform. If you're in the healthcare field, we got health disparities. How do we get to equity in the health, you know what I mean? Economic development, the tech, startup, creative economy. Creative economy is huge in this market, and with all the creativity that comes out of the city and the South End, we're not representing a fraction of the creative economy, meaning the money that comes in based on music, the film, and so on and so forth, even the fashion, right? And so, again, get involved. Everybody has something that they can add on. We have to imagine, design, build, and protect this new normal rooted in equity. We want to move away from Jim Crow, apartheid, what we're really facing right now, and move towards a new normal rooted in equity. That's what KingCountyEquityNow.com is about. There's a big, the next, active day, I guess we could say, is the 4th of July. This Saturday coming up, it's a day of action. Let's get free. Again, you could go to the Facebook, the Instagram, or the website to get more information on how you can plug in. But the day of action, let's get free. On the 4th of July, 23rd and Union is where we'll be, starting our action, you know what I mean? But people are also encouraged to think about ways that, again, they can move action towards us getting free, and not just free from these external forces, but even free from some of the things that have impacted us in our own families, in our own self, free from some of the, the white supremacy thinking that produces inferiority complexes, that produces self-hate, that then get distributed when we're harming ourselves, right? So get free from a lot of things that's holding us back from being our greatest selves. That's what we're doing on, the 4th day of July, next Saturday. So I just put everyone, let's get ready, let's get free, let's go. It's a marathon, like our brother Nipsey said, you know what I'm saying? And we need some real reparations. Repair rations.
All right. So you heard it right here. You know what I'm saying? I want to thank all of our guests today, and especially our guest right here, Nikita Oliver, K.Y. King Garrett. This was our first episode of Community Voices, a show we actually wanted to start last week, but it was volatile around here, man.
We want to thank you. You know what I'm saying? Being on the front line, being in harm's way. I'm listening to the stream. Oh, get the vest. Okay, I guess I do got to put the vest on. The vest? What type of, were you in Palestine? You know what I'm saying? So, you know what I mean? And you doing it, you know, to tell the real story of what's going on here. So we appreciate you and thank you for doing your part. And this is a great example. There is a lot of talent and genius in our community. Everyone doesn't have to do the same thing. Do what you do best and add that to our movement to get free and to get equity. So thank you again.
And if y'all could come out July 1st, we're actually going to be doing an action tying what's happening in our community to what is happening in Palestine, and remembering that our work here with black folks and getting our reparations is not disconnected from the global movement. So maybe ConvergeMedia could come out and amplify.
There's Nikki right there. We'll put it all together. She's the one who schedules it all, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's something we could do. Again, thank you. You know, most importantly, thank you for viewers out there. And one thing for sure that's happening in Seattle and beyond is that a lot of, I call the citizens in Seattle the stakeholders, and a lot of the stakeholders they're engaged. And one thing that this is happening is this is woken up people all over the Emerald City. And so I want to thank everybody viewing across Seattle, across the Evergreen State, nationally and internationally. This has been Community Voices. We'll talk to you soon.